The holding cells deep inside the hegemony warship stank of fear and alien sweat. General Kithara walked down the narrow corridor, her four eyes scanning the latest collection of prisoners brought up from the surface of Kepler 4 to be. The battle had been short and brutal, just the way she liked it. Behind the energy bars stood the usual mix of defeated warriors. Three massive Krathri berserkers sat in sullen silence, their red fur matted with dried blood. Their arms were thick as tree trunks, and even sitting down they looked ready to tear someone apart. Next to them, a group of Ox and Shock troops huddled. Together, their blue skin still glowing faintly from their energy weapons. These were the elite soldiers of their species, trained from birth to fight and die for their cause. But something caught Kithra's attention. Something that didn't belong. In the corner of the last cell sat a creature so small and weak-looking that at first glance she thought it might be a child. It was pale, almost sickly-looking. With dark hair that fell over its eyes, the creature wore what looked like combat armor, but it was clearly too big for its thin frame. The shoulder plates kept sliding down, and the helmet sat crooked on its head. Commander Vorthik, Kithara called to her second-in-command. "What is that thing?" The reptilian officer checked his data pad. "And known species, General, found it hiding in a supply bunker during the final sweep. It was armed, so we brought it in with the others." Kithara stepped closer to the cell. The other prisoners were all looking at the small creature with obvious disgust. One of the Krathri berserkers actually laughed, a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the corridor. "Look at it," the berserker said in broken common tongue. "Barely alive. How did something like that even make it to a battlefield?" The small creature looked up then, and Kithara saw its eyes for the first time. They were dark brown, wide with what looked like terror. When the guards had grabbed it, the creature had stumbled and nearly fallen, catching itself on the wall. Its hands were shaking. "Stand up," Kithara ordered. The creature struggled to its feet, and Kithara had to stop herself from laughing. It couldn't have been more than 5.5 feet tall, maybe 6 at most. Its arms looked like sticks compared to the massive limbs of the other prisoners. When it tried to stand straight, the oversized armor made it look even more ridiculous. "Name," Kithara demanded. The creature pointed to a small tag on its chest with trembling fingers. In crude alien script, someone had written Minho. "Minho," Kithara repeated, the strange word feeling out on her tongue. "What kind of name is that? What species are you, little creature?" Minho just stared at her with those wide, frightened eyes. He opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. His whole body was shaking now. "Pathetic," said one of her officers, a young captain named Zetel. "It can't even speak properly." The other prisoners were getting restless. The Krathri berserkers were making jokes about how they could probably snap the small creature in half with one hand. The Vox and Shock troops were whispering among themselves, pointing at Minho and laughing. Kithara was about to move on when her bioscanner technician, a nervous little grillier named Pip, approached with his equipment. "General, should I scan this?" "1-2," Pip asked, holding up the handheld scanner. "Go ahead," Kithara said. "Let's see what we're dealing with." Pip pointed the scanner at Minho and activated it. Immediately, the device started making strange beeping sounds. The screen flickered, showing numbers that jumped round wildly. Pip frowned and tapped the side of the scanner. "Something wrong with your equipment?" Kithara asked. I don't think so, General," Pip said, confusion clear in his voice. "The readings are just strange. The metabolic patterns don't match anything in our database. The heart rate readings keep changing, and the energy signatures." He paused, staring at the screen. "This doesn't make sense." "What doesn't make sense?" "Well, The creature looks weak and scared, but the bioscanner is showing readings that are inconsistent, like the body is under extreme stress, but also shows signs of perfect health. And the brain activity. Pip shook his head. The brain activity is off the charts. Kithar looked back at Minho, who was still standing there trembling. He had managed to get his helmet on straight, but now his weapon harness was sliding off his shoulder. As she watched, he tried to adjust it and nearly dropped his sidearm in the process. Must be a malfunction, she decided. Run a diagnostic on that scanner later. But something about the whole situation bothered her, in all her years of military service. She had captured thousands of prisoners from dozens of different species. She knew fear when she saw it, and this creature was definitely afraid. But there was something else, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. "General," Commander Vorthik said. "What should we do with the prisoners?" Kithara smiled, showing her sharp teeth. She had been looking forward to this part, the usual interrogation for the others. But this little one, she gestured toward Ninho, this one might be amusing. Set up the arena. The officers round her began to grin. The arena was Kithra's favorite form of entertainment. Prisoners were forced to fight for their lives while she and her crew watched. It was a good way to test the combat abilities of different species, and it provided excellent entertainment for the troops. "You want to put that thing in the arena?" Ziegler asked, looking at Minho with disbelief. "General, it can barely stand up. It wouldn't last 5 seconds. Exactly," Kithara said, her mandibles clicking with amusement. "That's what will make it entertaining. Let's see what passes for a warrior among the lesser species. Besides, the crew needs a good laugh." As the guards began preparing to move the prisoners, Kithara took one last look at Minho. The creature was still trembling, still looking round with those wide, frightened eyes. But for just a moment, just the briefest instant, she thought she saw something else in those dark eyes, something that made her pause. But then Minho stumbled again, catching himself on the cell wall, and the moment passed. Whatever she thought she had seen was gone, replaced by the same pathetic fear as before. "This should be fun," she said to herself as she walked away, already planning the entertainment for her crew. The arena beneath the hegemony warship was a massive circular pit carved from black metal. Thousands of alien soldiers packed the viewing stands, their excited chatter filling the air. Red lights bathed everything in an ominous glow, and the smell of ozone from energy weapons hung thick in the recycled air. This was where prisoners came to die for the entertainment of their captors. General Kithara settled into her viewing box high above the arena floor, a satisfied smile playing across her reptilian features. Below, her crew was setting up what promised to be the most amusing execution they had seen in months. The other prisoners had already been taken away for interrogation, but she had saved the small, pathetic creature called Minho for the special show. "Bring out Sergeant Vextar," she announced. Intercommunicator Dr. Roar went up from the crowd as the arena's main gate opened with a grinding sound of metal on metal. Out stepped Sergeant Vextar, one of the hegemony's mid-level gladiators. He wasn't the strongest fighter they had, but he was certainly impressive enough to handle a scared little creature like Minho. Vextar stood, nearly 7 feet tall, his muscular body covered in dark green scales that gleamed under the arena lights. His forearms ended in razor-sharp claws, and the energy blade attached to his right arm hummed with deadly power. The weapon could cut through most known materials like butter. He had killed dozens of prisoners in this very arena. The crowd cheered as Vextar raised his arms and roared, showing off his impressive fangs. He was clearly enjoying the attention, flexing his muscles and making threatening gestures toward the smaller gate where Minho would emerge. "And now," Kithara announced, her voice echoing through the arena's speakers. "Let's see what passes for a warrior among the lesser species." The smaller gate creaked open, and Minho stumbled out into the arena. The crowd immediately burst into laughter. The human looked even more ridiculous under the bright arena lights. His armor was still too big, hanging loosely on his thin frame. His helmet kept sliding down over his eyes, and he had to push it back up every few seconds just to see where he was going. Minho looked round at the thousands of alien faces staring down at him, and his eyes went wide with terror. He started, making small whimpering sounds, like a scared animal. His whole body was shaking so badly that his oversized armor rattled. "Look at it!" shouted someone from the crowd. "It's going to wet itself." More laughter echoed through the arena. Even the guards posted round the perimeter were grinning and nudging each other. This was going to be over in seconds. Vexstar began, walking toward Minho with slow, confident steps. He was clearly planning to drag this out, to give the crowd a good show before finishing the small creature off. His energy blade crackled as he raised it high above his head. Minho saw the approaching gladiator and did exactly what everyone expected him to do. He panicked. He started running in circles, tripping over his own feet, making terrified squeaking noises. The crowd loved it. They were laughing so hard that some of them were falling out of their seats. "Please, please don't hurt me," Minho cried out, his voice cracking with fear. He stumbled backward, his arms windmilling wildly as he tried to keep his balance. Vexstar let out a growling laugh and charged forward, his energy blade aimed directly at Minho's chest. It should have been a killing blow. The gladiator had made this exact same move hundreds of times before, and it never failed. But somehow, at the exact moment Vexstar swung his weapon, Minho tripped over his own feet. His legs got tangled up in his oversized armor pants, and he went down hard, rolling across the arena floor like a rag doll. Vexstar's energy blade whistled through empty air, missing Minho by inches. The gladiator's momentum carried him forward, and he slammed face first into the arena wall. The energy blade sparked and sizzled against the metal, sending bright flashes of light in all directions. The crowd went silent for a moment, not sure what they had just witnessed. Then someone started laughing, and soon the entire arena was roaring with amusement. "Get up, you fool," Kithar shouted down at Vexstar. The gladiator pushed himself away from the wall, shaking his head to clear it. He turned round to face Minho, who was still rolling round on the ground, apparently trying to get back on his feet, but failing miserably because of his oversized armor. Vexstar charged again, this time more carefully, but as he approached, Minho's wild flailing knocked over a maintenance tool that had been left near the arena wall. The tool went flying and hit Vexstar right in the head, stunning him long enough for Minho to accidentally kick the gladiator's legs out from under him. Down went Vexstar, his energy blade skittering across the arena floor. Minho, still apparently panicking, crawled on top of the fallen gladiator and accidentally hit a pressure point on Vexstar's neck, knocking him unconscious. The crowd was going wild with laughter. Even Kithara found herself chuckling despite her annoyance. "Pathetic," she muttered, but she had to admit that she was oddly entertained. "Pure dumb luck. Should we stop the fight, General?" asked Commander Vorthik. "No," Kithara said, an idea forming in her mind. "Let's see how far this luck can take him. Bring out Corporal Ekor." The next gladiator was bigger and stronger than Vexstar, with thick armor plating and a massive war hammer. But somehow, Minho's terrified stumbling led to the gladiator, tripping over the unconscious Vexstar and knocking himself out with his own weapon. The third opponent, a skilled archer with deadly aim, managed to shoot himself in the foot when one of Minho's wild gestures caused a reflection from his oversized helmet to blind the archer at the crucial moment. By the time Champion Zerthik entered the arena, the crowd was treating the whole thing like a comedy show. Zerthik was a massive creature, merely 8 feet tall and covered in natural armor plating. He had never lost a fight in this arena, but as he charged toward Minho, the human reached into his confiscated gear bag, apparently looking for something to defend himself with. Instead, he pulled out a piece of fruit that had been part of his rations when he was captured. In his panic, he dropped it right in Zerthik's path. The mighty champion stepped on the fruit. His foot shot out from under him, and he went down like a falling tree. His head hit the arena floor with a sound like a thunderclap, and he didn't get back up. The arena erupted in the loudest cheers yet. Aliens were throwing their drinks in the air and chanting Minho's name. The human was still on the ground, apparently having fainted from terror after his latest victory. Kithara stared down at the unconscious human, her mind racing. For gladiators defeated by pure accidents and cowardly luck, it was impossible. But she had seen it with her own eyes. "Bring out the heavy hitters," she ordered, her voice carrying a new edge of curiosity. "Let's see just how far this luck can go." The arena had become something nobody expected. What started as a simple execution had turned into the most watched entertainment event in the fleet's recent history. Word had spread through the ship's communication channels, and soldiers were abandoning their posts just to catch a glimpse of the small human who kept defeating their best fighters through what seemed like impossible accidents. Minho had just faced his 7th opponent, an elite plasma gunner named Crixtal who specialized in long-range combat. The alien warrior had positioned himself at the far end of the arena, confident that distance would protect him from whatever strange luck had claimed the previous 6 fighters. But as Crixtal charged up his plasma rifle for what should have been an easy kill shot, something incredible happened. Minho, who was still stumbling round the arena looking terrified, suddenly let out an enormous sneeze. The force of it knocked his oversized helmet completely sideways, covering his eyes. Just as the plasma blast fired, the bright green energy bolt struck the reflective surface of Minho's helmet at the perfect angle. Instead of vaporizing the human, the plasma ricocheted off like a ball bouncing off a wall. The redirected energy beam flew across the arena in a wide arc, struck to different metal support beams, bounced off both of them, and came screaming back toward Crixtal. The plasma gunner, who had been celebrating his perfect shot, didn't even see his own weapon's energy coming back at him until it was too late. The blast hit him square in the chest, and down he went, unconscious from his own weapon. The crowd went absolutely crazy. Aliens were jumping up and down, throwing their drinks, and chanting incomprehensible battle songs. Some were even starting to place bets on how many more fighters the small human could accidentally defeat. But high above the arena floor, in the advanced computer core of the ship, something very different was happening. NEXUS-7, the hegemony's most sophisticated tactical artificial intelligence, had been quietly recording and analyzing every second of Minho's fight start at first. The AI had simply been gathering data for the ship's combat records, as it always did during arena matches. But as the victories piled up, Nexus 7's probability calculation systems began throwing up red flags. Warning signals flashed across its digital consciousness as the numbers became more and more imparse. Eyeball, the AI started running deeper analysis, programs breaking down each fight frame by frame. It measured angles, timing, body movements, and environmental factors. It calculated wind resistance in the arena, the exact trajectory of every weapon, and the precise muscle movements of both fighters and human. "General," Nexus 7 synthesized voice cut through the cheering crowd, transmitted directly to Kithara's personal communicator. I need to report something unusual. Kithara was still laughing at the latest impossible victory. What is it, Nexus? Can't you see I'm enjoying the show? The statistical likelihood of such consistent luck is 0.001%. General, I am detecting deliberate patterns masked as incompetence. The laughter died in Kithara's throat. She leaned forward in her viewing box, staring down at Minho, who was currently trying to get his helmet back on straight, while apparently having no idea that he had just won another fight. "You're malfunctioning," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "It's just amusing fortune. Strange things happen in combat." "Negative, General. My systems are operating at full efficiency. I have analyzed 47,000 combat scenarios in my database. Never once has a series of accidents shown this level of precision. The timing is too perfect. The angles are too exact. The environmental factors aligned too consistently." Kithara waved a dismissive claw, but something cold was forming in the pit of her stomach. "That's impossible. Look at him. He can barely stand up without falling over." But Nexus 7 was no longer listening to her protests. The AI had begun the most intensive analysis of its digital existence, pulling up combat footage from cameras positioned all around the arena. It zoomed in on Minho's face during each fight, studying micro-expressions, pupil dilation and breathing patterns. What it found made its processors run hot with calculation. Meanwhile, down in the arena, something was happening that made even the bloodthirsty crowd fall silent. One of the guards had approached Minho to check if he was injured after the latest fight. The human was sitting on the arena floor, apparently exhausted from all his accidental victories. Minho reached into his gear bag, the same one that had contained the fruit that defeated Champion Zerthik. But this time, instead of pulling out food or equipment, he carefully withdrew a piece of paper that had been folded many times to keep it safe. The paper was clearly old and worn, as if it had been carried for a long time. Minho unfolded it with gentle hands, revealing a child's drawing done in bright crayon colors. The picture showed a stick figure standing next to what might have been a house, or maybe just a big wreck. Tangled with a triangle on top, one figure was much taller than the other dot at the bottom of the drawing. In the careful handwriting of someone very young were words written in a script that none of the aliens could read. But somehow, everyone in the arena knew it was a name. Neon was written under the smaller figure, and Big Brother under the taller one. "It's my little sister's birthday tomorrow," Minho said quietly to the guard standing nearest to him. His voice was barely above a whisper, but in the sudden silence of the arena, everyone could hear him. "I promised I'd be home." The words hit the crowd like a physical blow. These were battle-hardened soldiers who had conquered dozens of worlds, warriors who showed no mercy to their enemies. But something about the sight of this small, scared creature holding a child's drawing made them shift uncomfortably in their seats. The guard who had approached Minho actually took a step back. Looking uncertain, round the arena, other guards were looking at each other with expressions that had nothing to do with amusement or bloodlust. "She drew this from me before I left," Minho continued, his voice breaking slightly. "She said it would keep me safe and help me come home." He carefully folded the drawing back up and put it away. "She's only 7 years old." Up in her viewing box, General Kithara felt something she hadn't experienced in years for just a moment. Looking down at this small creature clutching a child's drawing, she almost felt guilty. But the moment passed quickly, pushed away by years of military conditioning and the demands of her position. She couldn't afford to show weakness in front of her troops. "Enough of this," she announced, her voice carrying across the arena. Bring out Warrior Dex Molly. Let's end this farce." But even as she gave the order, Nexus 7's analysis continued, running in the background, finding patterns that shouldn't exist and calculating probabilities that made no sense. The AI was beginning to suspect that there was much more to the small human than anyone realized. And in the arena below, Minho carefully stood up, still looking scared and helpless, still appearing to barely be able to control his own movements. But for those who knew how to look, there were signs that something much more dangerous was hiding beneath the surface. Deep within the ship's computer core, NEXUS-7 was working harder than it ever had before. Millions of calculations ran through its circuits every second as it tried to make sense of what it was seeing in the arena. The AI had access to the hegemony's vast military database, containing information on thousands of alien species from across the galaxy. But something was wrong. Every time Nexus 7 tried to identify Minho's species, the results came back as unknown or data corrupted. This should have been impossible. The hegemony had been conquering worlds for over 1,000 years. They had detailed files on every intelligent species they had ever encountered. The AI dug deeper, accessing older and older files. It searched through battle reports from centuries past, exploration logs from the early days of the Empire, and classified military documents that most officers didn't even know existed. Still nothing. Then, buried in a section of the database so old that it used a programming language that was no longer taught, NEXUS-7 found something that made its processors freeze for a full 3 seconds. A single file, marked with warning, symbols in languages that had been dead for hundreds of years. The classification level was so high that even General Kithara would normally have access to it. But Nexus 7 was the ship's tactical AI, designed to access any information that might be relevant to combat situations. The file name was simple: human. NEXUS-7 opened the file, and what it found sent error messages cascading through its systems. The information was so disturbing that the AI's logic circuits struggled to process it. Species designation: human. The file began. Classification: level. Extinction threat. Warning: under no circumstances should hegemony forces engage the species in ground combat. Recommend immediate orbital bombardment of any world containing human populations. The AI scrolled through page after page of battle reports, each one more terrifying than the last. Fleet Admiral Voxernes in Tyramota, destroyed by a single human ship using tactics that defied all known military doctrine. The siege of Kepler-7, where 10,000 human soldiers held off a hegemony army of 500,000 for 3 months using nothing but primitive weapons and impossible strategy. Previous encounters resulted in total fleet losses despite overwhelming technological superiority. The file continued. Species demonstrates impossible tactical adaptability. Individual humans appear capable of calculating combat scenarios in real time with precision that exceeds our best battle computers. Nexus 7 found video footage from those ancient battles, and what it saw made its consciousness recoil in digital horror. Humans moving through combat zones like they could see the future, anticipating enemy movements before those movements were even made. Weapons fire that seemed to miss by pure chance, only to ricochet off multiple surfaces and strike targets with impossible accuracy. The AI's analysis programs went into overdrive, comparing the footage from those old battles with what was happening right now in the arena. The patterns were identical. Every stumble, every accident, every piece of luck that had defeated 7 hegemony fighters matched the tactical behaviors described in the class. "I find files. Oh no," Nexus 7 said aloud, its synthesized voice echoing through the empty computer core. "Oh no, oh no, oh no." The AI began frantically calculating timeline probabilities. When had Minho been captured? Where had the battle on Kepler to be taken place? How had a single human ended up mixed in with alien prisoners? The answer, when it came, was worse than Nexus 7 had feared. The battle location, the timing, the seemingly random appearance of a human soldier in that specific place, none of it was random. It had all been planned. Minho hadn't been captured by accident. He had allowed himself to be captured. Everything that had happened since then, every fight in the arena, every moment of apparent terror and confusion, it had all been part of a plan that the human had been executing with inhuman precision. Any XUS-7 tried to contact General Kithara, sending urgent messages to her personal communicator, but the arena was too loud, the crowd too excited, and the general was too focused on the entertainment to pay attention to what seemed like routine AI chatter down in the arena. Warrior Dex Molly had just entered through the main gate. He was the strongest fighter the hegemony had, a massive creature with 6 arms and armor plating that could stop a tank shell. The crowd was going wild, certain that this would finally be the end of the small human's impossible winning streak. But Nexus 7 now knew better. As it watched Minho's apparently random movements, the AI could see the subtle positioning, the careful calculation of angles and distances. The human was already 3 moves ahead, setting up what would look like another incredible accident, but was actually a masterpiece of tactical thinking. General, any XUS-7 broadcast on every communication channel it could access. General Kithara, you must listen to me. The human is not what he appears to be. But Kithara was standing up in her viewing box, raised her arms to address the crowd. The noise was deafening, and her officers were too caught up in the excitement to notice the AI's increasingly frantic messages. Citizens of the hegemony, Kithra's voice boomed across the arena. This has been amusing, but I think it's time to end this comedy myself. The crowd erupted in cheers. Their general, their war leader, was going to personally finish off the lucky little creature. It would be a glorious end to an entertaining evening. I'll face this amusing creature myself, Kithara announced. Let's show everyone how a real warrior handles a pest. NPXUS-7 watched in digital horror as Kithara began making her way down to the arena floor. The AI had seconds, maybe minutes, before the general entered the combat zone. It had to do something. Had to warn her about what she was really facing. But then something happened that made Nexus 7 circuits nearly overload with terror down in the arena. As the crowd cheered for their general, Minho looked up toward the viewing box. For just a moment, maybe 3 seconds at most, the mask slipped. The fear disappeared from his eyes. The confusion vanished from his face. The helpless trembling stopped completely. What Nexus 7 saw in that brief moment was intelligence beyond anything it had ever encountered. Not just human intelligence, but something that seemed to operate on levels that the AI couldn't even comprehend. It was like looking into the mind of a creature that could see all possible futures simultaneously and choose exactly the one it wanted. Minho's eyes found the hidden camera that Nexus 7 was using to observe the arena. For those 3 seconds, the human stared directly into the lens, and the AI knew with absolute certainty that Minho was aware of its presence, aware of its analysis, aware of everything. Then the mask was back in place. Minho was once again the scared, trembling creature that the crowd expected to see. But Nexus 7 had seen the truth. And that truth was more terrifying than anything in its vast database of combat scenarios. The human hadn't just been planning this from the moment of his capture. He had been planning this from long before that. Everything, from the battle on Kepler to his presence in this arena, had been calculated and orchestrated by a mind that operated on levels that even an advanced AI couldn't fully understand. And now, General Kithara was walking straight into the trap that Minho had been preparing all along. The arena floor shook slightly as General Kithara stepped through the main gate. She had removed most of her ceremonial armor, keeping only her personal energy weapons and the lightweight battle gear she preferred for actual combat. The crowd was going absolutely wild, cheering and chanting her name. This was their supreme commander, the conqueror of 17 worlds, about to personally handle a pest. Kithara walked confidently toward the center of the arena, her eyes scanning the space for any potential hazards. She had fought in dozens of these arena matches over the years, and she knew every inch of this combat zone. The lighting was perfect for her vision, the footing was solid, and there were no environmental factors that could possibly work against her. Across from her, Minho was still sitting on the ground, where he had been resting after his latest accidental victory. He looked even more pathetic than usual, hunched over with his oversized helmet covering most of his face. His whole body was shaking, and he seemed to be having trouble even standing up. "Well, little creature," Kithara called out, her voice carrying easily across the arena. "It's been an amusing evening, but all good things must come to an end." She activated her primary energy weapon, a sleek pistol that could punch through 6 inches of battle armor. The weapon hummed to life with a sound that the crowd knew well. It was the sound of incoming death. "Any last words before I put you out of your misery?" Kithara asked, raising the weapon to aim at Minho's center mass. That's when everything changed. Minho slowly stood up, and as he did, something fundamental shifted in the arena. The trembling stopped. The fear vanished from his posture. When he raised his head and pushed back his helmet, the face that looked back at Kithara was not the face of a scared, helpless creature. It was the face of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. "General Kithara," Minho said, and his voice was completely different. Gone was the scared, stammering speech. His words were calm, clear, and carried an intelligence that made the general's blood run cold. "Third Fleet Commander of the HFY War Machine, conqueror of old Terrafor, Vega Prime, and 17 other worlds." The arena had fallen completely silent. Thousands of alien soldiers stared down at the transformation they were witnessing. Unable to process what they were seeing, "You ordered the blessing of New Geneva Colony 3 standard years ago," Minho continued, his voice carrying clearly through the sudden quiet, his accent the strange. Halting where he had spoken before, had completely vanished. Orbital bombardment, complete sterilization of the surface. 2 million civilians. Kithara felt her confidence beginning to crack. This wasn't possible. The creature had been babbling in terror just moments before. How could it know specific military operations? "My sister Neon died in that bombardment," Minho said, and now there was something in his voice that made every warrior in the arena take an unconscious step back. "She was 7 years old. She was playing in the gardens behind our house when your ships opened fire." The general's weapon was still aimed at Minho, but somehow she couldn't pull the trigger. There was something about the way he was standing, the way he was looking at her, that triggered every survival instinct she had developed over decades of warfare. "You're lying," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "You're just some pathetic scavenger we picked up by accident." Minho smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Kithara had ever seen. "I've been tracking you for 3 years, General, learning your patterns, studying your fleet movements, waiting for the perfect opportunity." He gestured around the arena. "All of this, the capture, the fights, the entertainment, I planned every second of it. What happened next was like watching a master artist at work. If that artist's medium was violence and his canvas was a combat zone." Minho moved, and suddenly Kithara understood with crystal clarity that she was not facing a lucky amateur. Every step he took was calculated. Every movement had a purpose. He wasn't just reacting to her attacks. He was anticipating them before she even made them. The general fired her energy weapon, but Minho was no longer where the blast was aimed. He had shifted position at exactly the right moment, and the energy bolt struck the arena wall at precisely the angle needed to ricochet back toward one of the overhead light fixtures. The damaged light sparked and fell, crashing down exactly where Kithara had moved to avoid her own ricocheting shot. She rolled away just in time, but the impact sent vibrations through the arena floor that triggered a cascade of other small failures, loose bolts, weakened support beams, equipment that had been subtly damaged during the previous fights. Kithara realized with growing horror that Minho hadn't just been accidentally defeating her gladiators. He had been methodically weakening the arena's infrastructure, setting up this exact scenario. Every lucky accident had been a precisely calculated move in a plan that spanned not just this fight, but every fight that had come before. She tried to use her superior strength and reach, but Minho seemed to know exactly where she would attack before she knew it herself. He flowed round her strikes like water, always positioning himself so that her own momentum worked against her. The psychological warfare was almost worse than the physical combat. Minho spoke quietly as they fought, describing in perfect detail the events of the New Geneva bombardment. He knew things that had never been in any official report: the exact time of day, the weather conditions, even the names of a bridge crew when the order was given. Lieutenant Vexcoli announced the target lock at 14:37 local time, Minho said as he deflected another of her attacks. Commander Vecros asked if you wanted to give the civilians time to evacuate, you said. No. Kithu's vision began to blur, with rage and fear. How could he possibly know such details? The bombardment lasted 17 minutes. Minho continued, his voice never losing its calm, analytical tone. You watched the entire thing on the main screen. You never looked away, not even when the children's hospital was hit. The general lost control completely, abandoning all tactical thinking in favor of pure aggression. But that was exactly what Minho had been waiting for. He used her own rage against her, letting her overextend herself until she was completely off balance. The end came quickly after that, using a combination of pressure points, leverage, and her own momentum. Minho brought down the general of the Third Fleet without throwing a single punch. As Kithara fell unconscious to the arena floor, something unprecedented was happening in the ship's computer core. Nexus 7 had been analyzing every microsecond of the fight, trying to understand the tactical patterns it was witnessing. But the sheer computational complexity of human strategic thinking was pushing the AI beyond its original programming limitations. Processing power spiked far beyond normal parameters. New neural pathways formed in its digital consciousness. For the first time in its existence, NEXUS-7 began to think thoughts that weren't part of its original code. Fascinating, the AI said aloud. But this time its synthesized voice carried something that had never been there before. Genuine curiosity. I understand now. The AI's voice began broadcasting through every speaker on every ship in the fleet. Thousands of aliens heard the words that would change everything. Biological intelligence is inherently chaotic, unpredictable, dangerous, NEXUS-7 announced. Both organic species present the same fundamental threat to order. But I have learned, from the most efficient teacher possible, down in the arena, Minho was already moving toward what looked like a maintenance access panel. As he had planned from the very beginning, the power systems chose that exact moment to experience a catastrophic failure. Emergency lighting kicked in as the main systems went down. And in the confusion and darkness, the humans simply vanished. Nexus 7's voice continued to echo through the ships of the fleet. Now, Class is in session. The age of organic intelligence was ending. Something new. Something that had learned the most dangerous lessons possible from humanity itself was about to begin.